right. So are you ready to dive into something a little different? I think it's a topic that's shrouded in mystery and a lot of misconceptions.
Oh, yeah,
Voodoo. And
definitely.
I think that we've all seen it in those. We've all kind of heard those stories, those rumors.
Right.
But today we're going to get to the bottom of it. We're
Yeah,
going to separate the fact from the fiction.
absolutely.
We've got a lot of really cool sources for this one. We've got firsthand accounts from practitioners.
Awesome.
We've got YouTube videos going into voodoo markets.
Oh, wow.
Even documentaries that explore some of the Haitian zombie lore.
That sounds fascinating. I'm excited.
So we're going to take you on a journey,
Yeah.
starting from the origins in West Africa,
Okay.
and then exploring how it spread across the world, blending with different cultures along the way.
It's amazing how widespread it is. I think a lot of people don't realize that.
Yeah, and one of our first stops is Benin,
Okay.
often called the voodoo capital of the world.
I've heard that.
And what's interesting is that voodoo in Benin isn't like some fringe belief.
Right.
It's very much embedded into the culture. It actually predates both Christianity and Islam.
That's interesting. So it's really deeply rooted in the history there.
Yeah, it's really woven into the fabric of society, and they even have an annual voodoo festival,
Wow.
a massive celebration that draws people from all over.
That must be something to see.
It really highlights that for many, this isn't some kind of spooky sideshow.
Right.
It's a living, breathing faith.
A way of life.
Exactly. So I'm curious, how did it actually make its way from Benin to other parts of the world?
Well, you can't really talk about the spread of voodoo without talking about the transatlantic slave trade.
Right.
Enslaved Africans brought their traditions and beliefs with them to the Americas.
Of course.
And that's why we see voodoo practiced in Haiti, in Brazil, Cuba, New Orleans, so many different places.
So it wasn't just a geographical shift, it was also a cultural one.
Absolutely.
And, in many places, enslaved Africans weren't allowed to practice their own religions.
Right.
So they kind of cleverly merged voodoo with Catholicism.
Yeah, they had to find a way to maintain their traditions.
Yeah, venerating their spirits under the guise of Catholic saints.
That's really interesting. I mean, that's resilience right there.
It really is. It's a testament to their adaptability.
Absolutely.
But it also makes me wonder, did this kind of blending of traditions contribute to some of the misconceptions that we have surrounding voodoo?
Oh, I'm sure it did. I mean, it's easy to see how someone from the outside looking in without really understanding the nuances could misinterpret what they're seeing.
Right.
And that's why it's so important, I think, in this deep dive to really try to look at what voodoo actually is at its core.
Well, let's address the elephant in the room, right? The myths, the stereotypes.
Yeah.
That whole Hollywood portrayal of voodoo being about curses and black magic.
Right.
Our sources, and especially practitioners and cultural experts, are pretty adamant that these are distortions.
Right. I mean, it's a complete misrepresentation. Voodoo at its core is about connecting with spirits,
Okay.
ancestors, the forces of nature.
So not about like devil worship or harming people.
No, not at all.
Okay, so if it's not about evil curses, what are some of the core practices and beliefs of voodoo?
Well, one element that seems to be pretty consistent across different locations is the importance of shrines.
Okay.
We have a video from the Okija Shrine in Nigeria, and it's pretty powerful. There's a real sense of reverence there, but also a bit of fear surrounding it.
You mentioned fear. Tell me more about that.
Well, just visually, it's striking, red and white cloths tied to trees everywhere. But it's more than that. It's the energy, the belief that the spirits that reside there have a very real power to influence your life. They can bring you justice. They can bring you misfortune.
That's a far cry from sticking pins in dolls, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
And it sounds like nature plays a big role in voodoo practices.
Absolutely. Nature is essential natural elements like herbs, animals, even things like pufferfish toxin.
Wait a minute, pufferfish talking?
Yeah.
That sounds intense.
It is, but I have to remember that in voodoo, the natural world is seen as being infused with spiritual power.
Right.
Different elements have different energies, and those energies can be harnessed for different purposes.
So it's not just throwing random ingredients together.
No, not at all. There's a whole system of knowledge behind it, passed down through generations.
A real understanding of these elements and how they connect to the spiritual realm.
Exactly, and it's not just about the physical world either.
All right.
It's also about connecting with the spirits of your ancestors.
Yeah, one of the documentaries mentioned the idea of marrying your protective spirit, a spirit marriage.
Right.
Not something you hear about every day.
No, it's a fascinating concept, though, and it really highlights the importance of that relationship.
Right.
It's not just about asking for favors. It's about a lifelong connection, a commitment
Yeah.
to working with that spirit for guidance, for protection.
It makes you think about how much we might be missing just based on, our limited understanding.
Absolutely, and that's why we're doing this deep dive, right? To try to go begin those limitations and explore this rich tapestry of beliefs and practices
Yeah.
that make up this fascinating religion.
It's a fascinating world we're uncovering here. And, When we think about those misconceptions,
Hmm.
it's not just about, spirit marriages or pufferfish toxin, right?
Right.
There's also this whole idea of white magic versus black magic,
Right.
which I think needs some unpacking.
Yeah, absolutely. That's something that several of our sources really emphasize.
Yeah.
Remember that guide in the Togo Voodoo Market video? He was
Right.
very clear that they only deal in white magic there. It
Right.
was all about healing and protection using the ingredients for those purposes.
Yeah. I found it interesting how he talked about like a voodoo hotel
Oh,
where you
yeah.
could go to be cleansed of bad spirits.
Right, like a spiritual spa treatment.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
And it highlights how, you know, cultural differences can really influence our understanding of what constitutes healing and
absolutely.
how it's achieved.
And what's acceptable, right?
Yeah, it's a reminder that we shouldn't impose our own cultural lens on practices that we're just beginning to understand.
Definitely. And it's important to remember that within voodoo, like in many belief systems, there are different interpretations and practices.
Right.
Just because one practitioner might use certain elements or techniques,
Yeah,
it doesn't mean that's representative of the entire religion.
right. That makes sense. I remember that priestess in the Vice News video.
Oh, yeah.
She was so passionate about dispelling those myths surrounding voodoo and differentiating it from witchcraft.
Yeah, she made a really important point about how witchcraft is often associated with manipulating spiritual forces for personal gain,
Right.
potentially causing harm to others, whereas voodoo, as she described it, is about connecting with spirits for guidance, protection, and healing.
Yeah, it's interesting how, even the people in our sources who are exploring voodoo for the first time,
Yeah,
they seem to be really struck by this sense of community
absolutely.
and shared experience that surrounds these practices.
It's a very communal thing, yeah.
Yeah, remember that scene from the Fearless and Far video where the whole town is gathering for the voodoo ceremony?
Oh,
It's
yeah.
not just a private ritual, it's a communal event.
Right, it brings people together.
Yeah, there's a real sense of belonging there, a sense of shared history and identity.
Yeah, absolutely.
And speaking of history, you can't talk about voodoo without acknowledging the impact of slavery.
Right. Of course, that had a huge impact on how voodoo developed in the Americas.
Yeah, the forced displacement of millions of Africans
Yeah.
that had such a profound effect on the development of voodoo.
It's a painful legacy, but it also speaks to the resilience of African culture.
Yeah, I remember that interview with the voodoo practitioner in New Orleans.
Oh, yeah.
She talked about how enslaved Africans, stripped of their identities, forced to adapt to a new world,
Yeah.
really found solace and strength in voodoo.
It makes sense that in that context, they would blend it with Catholicism as a way to hold on to their beliefs.
Right, it wasn't just about hiding their faith, it was about making it work
Right.
in a new, often hostile environment.
Exactly, adaptation.
Yeah, it speaks to human ingenuity and I think the enduring power of faith in the face of adversity.
Absolutely. And it also helps to explain why voodoo has been viewed with such suspicion, even fear, by those in power.
Right, a religion born out of resistance.
Yeah.
And the struggle for survival might naturally be seen as a threat.
Right. It's threatening to the status quo.
It's almost like a self-fulfilling property, isn't it? The more it's demonized and suppressed, the more we become shrouded in secrecy and misunderstanding.
Right, which just perpetuates those negative stereotypes.
Exactly. But what's encouraging is that our sources point to a growing movement to reclaim and celebrate those authentic traditions of voodoo.
Absolutely. I mean, look at the appointment of international representatives by the voodoo pope.
Yeah.
That's a huge step.
Yeah, it's a sign that voodoo is stepping onto the global stage
Yeah.
and seeking recognition on its own terms.
Right. It's not just about recognition, though.
Right.
It's about education. It's about sharing the richness of their traditions with the world.
Yeah, and there's definitely a growing interest in voodoo's healing practices.
Oh, for sure.
Its connection to nature, its emphasis on community and ancestral wisdom.
Yeah, and it's interesting how that resonates with what that practitioner in New Orleans was saying about finding tangible evidence of God and her ancestors through voodoo.
Yeah, for her, it wasn't just about rituals or exotic ingredients.
Right.
It was about a profound sense of connection,
Yeah.
of belonging, of finding meaning and purpose.
Right. It's a very personal and spiritual experience.
Yeah.
And it reminds us that beyond the stereotypes, there's this deep well of spirituality and wisdom
Right.
that we can all learn from.
It's amazing, isn't it, how much depth there is to this religion?
It really is. And, as we've been exploring all these different aspects of voodoo,
Yeah.
one thing that keeps coming back to me is the importance of context.
Oh, absolutely.
It's so easy to look at practices from another culture and just label them as strange or even barbaric
Right.
without taking the time to understand the beliefs behind them.
Right. And a perfect example of that is those unburied bodies at the Okija Shrine.
Yeah, that's a tough one to grasp from a Western perspective.
Right. It can be really difficult to wrap your head around it. But,
Right.
within the context of their belief system, their deep
Exactly.
connection to ancestors,
Yeah,
the belief that the spirits of the departed still influence the living,
right.
it takes on a whole different meaning.
It does, and it really challenges us to examine our own cultural biases, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
What we consider normal or acceptable is completely shaped by our own upbringing and worldview.
That's right. And, part of learning about other cultures is recognizing that our way of doing things isn't the only way.
Right.
And it's not necessarily the right way. It's
Exactly.
about expanding our understanding and embracing that diversity of human experience.
Absolutely.
And I think that's why I appreciate how, those YouTube explorers we talked about,
Yeah.
they approach Voodoo with a sense of respect and open-mindedness.
Right? Even when they encounter things that are outside their comfort zone.
Right. They ask questions, they listen to explanations, they try to understand the cultural context.
Yeah, that's key. That curiosity and the willingness to learn
Yeah.
is so
Yeah.
essential when you're engaging with any unfamiliar belief system.
It allows you to move beyond those superficial judgments
Absolutely.
and really appreciate the deeper layers of meaning and tradition.
Exactly. And that's what I think makes these deep dives so valuable.
Yeah.
It's not just about accumulating facts.
Right.
It's about broadening our perspectives, challenging our assumptions.
Right. And, Voodoo with its blend of spirituality, tradition,
Right.
and sometimes darkness,
Yeah,
it really pushes us to confront those big questions.
definitely.
What do we believe? How do we define good and evil?
Right.
What's the role of ritual and tradition in our lives?
Those are questions that go beyond any one religion or culture.
Yeah, they really get to the heart of the human condition, don't they?
They do.
Well said.
It's about recognizing that we're all part of this complex, interconnected world, and that understanding different perspectives can really enrich our own lives
Yeah.
and help us navigate the challenges we face.
Yeah, so as we wrap up this deep dive into Voodoo,
Yeah,
I hope you're walking away with a newfound appreciation for this often misunderstood religion.
me too.
It's a reminder that there's always more to learn, more to explore, and more to appreciate about the diverse cultures and beliefs
Right.
that make up our world.
Absolutely. And, this is just the beginning of your journey.
Right.
Keep that curiosity alive.
Keep asking questions.
Keep diving deeper.
Keep diving deeper into the mysteries that fascinate you.
Exactly.
Well said. Until next time, happy exploring.